Oh, and welcome back to the podcast. It feels like we were just here. As a product manager, I try to advocate as much as I can for the product operating model. It's not Agile transformation anymore. Remember, it's Marty Kagan wrote a book, Transform Product Operating Model now. Okay, we need a team with all the skills that the team needs to deliver what is being asked for, the value, right? We don't want to wait on people. There's a concept of throughput that's on top of this. So I've come to believe over the period of a career that the consolidation of skill and money into this Ivory Tower style apparatus inside of a business, like an area that is outside of any of the teams doing the work, like we got to take all of this particular. HR is a good one. Finance is a good one. You see this in a lot of companies. Yeah. But sometimes they'll take specialist roles, DBAs, stuff like that. We got to consolidate all this into an ivory tower, and then we'll stand on the castle walls and you come and beg for the quote resources, and we'll throw the lettuce down at you. I want to make the case for the people versus the ivory tower, and I want to talk about why this consolidation of skill, like how you see it, how it manifests, and then the people that are going to represent and say, no, this is a good thing. Like what points are they going to use to defend it? And then what points are basically the rest of us that are trying to do a good job and run a good business and don't play games, what we're gonna say. So there's two sides. It's the people and the ivory tower.
The people versus the ivory tower.
That's
okay.
Right.
Well, let the hearing begin.
Oh, okay. This is a great format. I'm excited by this. Let's start with my favorite one that I think is the easiest to critique, and it is economies of scale. They will say, hey, if we consolidate across departments, we can save on labor, we can save on bulk purchases, we can save on vendor relationships. Another good one is like, I will choose your ALM for you, and then you will use the ALM I choose and no other ALM to do your work. Yeah. And then we'll save all money as a company because I chose an ALM.
Economies of scale is one of those things that's been really guised over the years, right? Under the guise of saving money at the expense of something, they just stop at saving money. Ultimately, what this comes about as is you're saving money is a short-term thing, right? So the person making the decision maybe is rewarded based on that. I was kind of touched on that on a different podcast. Mm-hmm. If that's what you're being measured on, that's what you'll do. So buy a cheaper tool, we're saving money. Consolidate team members into a specialist team. We need fewer of them because they're not. Why should we have those on the teams? We can just round robin those around as we fit.
Under the fallacy of utilization optimization. It's like a conceptual idea. It's not anything that has to be proven. But one of the tenets of agility is the team develops its own processes. Like that's a core tenet right there. For business agility. It certainly is a core tenet. Like we're either going to be moving towards more business agility, or you're going to be removing our business agility. You can wear any color you want, as long as it's red. Like that was, wait a minute.
Not even shades of red are allowed in some companies. So I agree with you there. Unfortunately, people that are making these decisions of consolidation just don't know any better, right? They're rewarded based on the results of those actions. So that's what they're going to gravitate to. Sadly, the teams are not consulted in this. The teams are just handed down these decisions, and they have to perform using a tool that perhaps doesn't suit them, using a structure that's definitely not going to suit them.
Well, yeah. So tools, I can kind of like, everybody can gripe and kind of just get over it.
It's not a perfect tool, but
org design. I mean, when they say that, okay, well, you're not going to have all of the architects through the whole business are now going to be controlled by the ivory tower, and we're going to have. So whenever you want to make changes to certain core systems, or really probably any system at all, you have to get sign off from one of our architects. So now they're putting delays in. I'm just like, the economies of scale. It sounds good financially on paper when everything's a spreadsheet, but it completely fails in the real world.
Absolutely. So one of the things that makes it easier for this kind of thing to kind of take hold, gravitate, is the ease at which you can massage numbers, like to your point, in a spreadsheet. You can easily illustrate savings, cost savings is where that typically comes down as. But there isn't a corresponding column. What are you giving up, right? That's never on the spreadsheet.
Right.
And the representation on that spreadsheet for that column would come from people that are impacted. Because these people making decisions, they're not impacted, except they get their bonus if they get the savings done. Even a simple thing like the tools, right? That you're saying decisions are made based on cost, and being able to negotiate a cheaper contract with a vendor, as opposed to, hey team, go figure out what tool you need, and then we'll go see if we can strike up a good deal.
Right. Yeah. Well, that would require. I mean, look, what you just pointed out is a great example, because contracts, purchasing, things like that, like large organizations that need contracts and purchasing as a separate business unit because they're trying to control everything. The funny thing is, like, I can't remember the name of the book about Netflix's culture, early culture, and they didn't have any purchase rules or anything. Anybody could buy anything, and now if you go and spend $60,000 on the corporate card for some luxury vacation, whatever, you're probably going to get fired.
But for the most part, that kind of a model gives the team the autonomy to get the optimum solution in place, as opposed to one that's purely dictated on dollars.
Well, speaking of dictating things, along the lines of this is standardization. Standardization for standardization's sake.
Right.
Again, along with economies of scale, I figured this is another one that's slung out there with some bold claims and without ever seeing numbers to back up these claims. I'll give you an example. Scrum Masters, for example. We're going to take all the Scrum Masters away from the teams. The Capital One actually did the opposite of this. They took all the Scrum Masters away from the centralized body and said the teams are going to own them. Now they got beat up in the news because that little nuance of their decision wasn't right. This is the opposite of that, standardization. So we have to take all the Scrum Masters from the teams, and then we have to put them in some sort of a business agility office or something like that, where they're loaned to teams, and it sounds good on paper. It even sounds good to me, actually. Hey, we'll loan you an Agile coach for 3 months, kind of whip your team into shape, help you along, help identify some things in the organization. This person isn't beholden to anybody in your business unit or your reporting structures or whatever, so they're a little more free to recommend things. It sounds good in theory, and then you don't measure the effectiveness of that. You have no way to measure it. So I've always seen that. I can even make a case where it sounds good, but in actuality, I've never seen it be applied and then measured and then shown to the employees, like, this is what you guys got. Don't you think it's great?
I have seen it. It is very rare. So that comes down, using your example of Scrum Masters, coaches, etc. It comes down to doing an assessment before they come in, and then doing an assessment periodically if it's a very long initiative, or just doing it at the end and say, is there a marked improvement, right? But I've seen this standardization approach for other things, QA or DevOps or even product people, where they're told, well, you're a product owner, right? You can serve 3 teams. You can serve 4 teams. And each team's focus is different, disparate products lines or at least products, right?
Yeah.
It's too big of an ask. But those that make the decision, they can justify it, because now you only have to hire 1 instead of 4. So it's just, again, purely a unit measure, cost savings, that angle that they're playing with. They're not looking at the other side of the equation, as I call it, right? Which is, what are you giving up by doing that? You have poor quality information because one person cannot be in front of 4 different groups of customers often enough, work with 4 different teams, all of that. So standardization looks good because we've done this way. Like PMOs are a classic example of that. The standard PMO, they would document everything a project manager needs to do, right? While at the same time telling you the definition of a project is it's a unique endeavor. Well, if it's unique, how can you standardize it? How can you standardize your approach to it? But that's what they do. I remember joining a PMO many years ago. On my first day, I was handed a binder, a physical binder. It had everything I needed in there, nicely tabbed. This is what you do. So if you didn't follow that, then guess what? You're not conforming, and therefore, in their eyes, you're not performing the role. So you find yourself closer to the door, the exit. It's sad because people have ideas and they're not entertained. It's just whatever's captured in the standard. This is our internal standard.
I think when teams lose the ability to figure out the best way of working for them and the business that they're involved in, they will put that mental mode that discovers things, the explore, exploit loop, they'll kind of put that on the back burner and they won't use that muscle. And then that muscle will kind of deteriorate as we'll let the Ivory Tower tell us what hammer to use. So then the Ivory Tower, everyone onboards, they get one hammer. Maybe it's a sledgehammer. It legitimately is a hammer in name, I guess. But I mean, if your job is to do tiny little finish nails, I mean, a sledgehammer is not the right. Well, it's,
No, but we bought 1,000 of those sledgehammers, and it was cheap per hammer.
This is our standard. This is what you're
exactly.
Use. I guess the other argument against this would be like, well, Brian, that's ridiculous. I mean, if we take on a new thing of work, then the people can approach the central authority here and ask for an exception to the process and whatever. You know what I mean? Like that would be the pushback.
That's true. They could do that, but there's probably going to be so much inertia. Right, and their suggestions, ideas will probably be just squashed, I imagine. the flip side of it is, well, if we let the teams do what they want, we'll have anarchy.
Right. Yeah.
Right. And we can't have that. This goes back to another podcast we did about illusion of control. We got to be in control. We got to know what everybody's doing. And we got to be able to pick somebody up here and put them over here, because at the end of the day, everybody is a Lego piece. Right. So unfortunately, it's this whole idea of economies of scale. It's easy to illustrate on paper, so to speak, in a spreadsheet. But in reality, it is actually costing money.
I don't want to spend any time talking about scaling, because like now that I'm like firmly on the business side, I see that scaling is just like a organizational design failure. You failed to draw borders around it's one or more teams. Basically, there's a limit, right? Who are operating a business and have some metrics and whatever, and that those teams can coordinate amongst themselves to make those customers happy. Like, yeah, if you keep drawing bigger and bigger circles, you'll add more and more customers. But I feel you should be breaking those customer pools down. You should be working to break down your pools of customers and then let your teams follow, along with that. Again, it's super complicated. Maybe we'll leave that for another podcast. There's something that you dipped into that is interesting, and that's the concept of flexibility. Let's say we're engaged in like 7 different lines of business, and every one of those lines of business has a product manager. Okay, we're going to take all the product managers out of the reporting structures of their individual businesses, and the Ivory Tower is now going to own all the product. So we'll have a CPO, Gary, the sales guy, right? Mm-hmm. He plays golf with the CEO. He's a smart guy. And then he'll own all of the product managers, and then they'll be loaned back to their business units. And then when we need them to do corporate things to spin up new initiatives, and we'll take them back. And I mean, that will be sold under the guise of being more agile. We can be more flexible because we got these, quote, resources. Maybe do they need to do a refinement every week with their teams? Maybe we can cut that to every other week, and the team can do some of the work, and they can just ask the person when they need help or whatever, and they can go do this other thing in part-time. Like, this is how I've seen things like this pitched.
Yeah. Distorted view of the benefits, right?
Yes.
Of doing it that way.
Yes.
I agree with you, first of all. The difficulty is not having data to defend the situation that is being thrust upon you, honestly. Not having data. They have the data. They have the spreadsheets, because it's easy to measure cost. It's harder to measure benefits. And it's harder to measure the opportunity costs, right?
Yes.
Like, what are we giving up by not doing
Well,
this?
in the product management example, you have no idea what you're getting. You don't know what those product managers would have discovered,
right,
had you not put this additional stream of work. You can apply that to anybody else. I mean, the product. It's easy for me to apply to product management because I am a product manager. I'm sure you could do it with development. I mean, what refactoring could you be doing, or what investigation of new technologies could you be doing? Like, there are things you could be doing, but for some reason, the Ivory Tower, when they make this pitch, they paint it as, well, Brian's only dedicated to Brian and Ohm's company A, and he spends all his time over there. Surely that can't take all of his time. He's got to we can't have him sitting around. He only was working 42.5 hours a week. That's another at least hours that he that's at least 20 more hours we could be squeezing out of Brian. Like, that's the kind of pitch that would be made for this category. So it's disingenuous. I'm trying to think of a way to defend this point for the Ivory Tower where it would be genuine. But again, it's just like in the Ivory Tower, you're so far from the work. You have no idea what opportunities are missed by removing that person.
I think by experience and looking to your left and right, your competitors or even other companies that are suffering, you might be able to see that, but you can't measure it. The other side effect of this kind of centralized approach, right, is it tends to give rise to specialties, right? So instead of having the core skills that are needed on the team level, you now have people that are in this pocket, and they're specialists, right? So then what happens? Well, you need a specialist on your team, so you have to make a requisition to that department. And if someone's available, you get that person. If they're not available, you have to wait, or you get somebody else. At the same time, what happens is these specialists say, well, we're special now. We have special skills. Right. We want more money, right? So everything's costing more now.
I've seen this with testing. I've seen this with DBA. I've seen this with architects. I've seen this with DevOps. I've seen this with Scrum Masters. I've seen this with Agile coaches / Scrum Masters. I've seen this with product people. Yeah. And the first groups that this happens to, this kind of like, we're going to take them away and we're going to put them in this pool, is all the finance people, HR, recruiting, like that wing of the company. They take those people away. I've never seen those people stay in a distributed, where never. Like your recruiter is this particular person. They know your teams. They know your line of business. They know your customers. They work in the Ivory Tower and they don't report to you. So you get this is where, like, if you ever have been applying for jobs and you get like, hey, thanks for applying. We looked at your resume and we like you or whatever. And you look at your watch and you're like, holy cow, it's been like 6 weeks since I put that application in. Yeah. This is one of the reasons why. Like, a recruiter who's dedicated to the teams who are hurting and need positions like filled, they would never be able to sit on. Like, I asked somebody on my team, like, I say, hey, this is my top priority. I need to get it done. Who can accomplish that? Well, my developers can't go and screen resumes and write a job description and release it out on all the platforms and whatever, right? So I need the recruiter from my company to do it. Well, if they worked for me filling the position on my team, I would hand them something, just like on the board with the rest of the team. I'd write, "Okay, we need to fill this position."
Task. Yep.
That's their task. They pick it up, and then every day, hey, this is where we're at. This is the. But boy, to not be accountable to the team, wow, that's a whole new world. Where can I sign up for that?
Exactly. Well, that organization is circling a drain. Just don't know it.
I mean, like you say it, but it's so regular. My problem with all of the Ivory Tower's points in these categories that we've kind of gone over is they don't make a case with, like, let me measure the condition now, let me suggest a change, let me make the change, let me measure the condition after the change, and then let's discuss what you're getting. Let's discuss the quality of service. Like, anybody who's in this, if I take in team topologies, X as a service is a valid mode of operations for teams, method of working between teams. I can't remember what it's called in the book. Sorry, I'm failing. Sorry, Manuel Pius and the other guy. I forgot.
Skeleton.
Right. This is why I need to get my Twitter back up and working so I can zing those guys and be like, another reference to team topologies in this week's podcast.
I'll give you an example of this whole kind of madness. The company I work for, we used to book our own travel. We were consultants traveling out to customer sites all the time. So we'd book our own travel. Somebody wised up and said, these people are spending too long researching flights and hotels and rental cars. Right. So what we're going to do is we're going to hire one person, and they're our internal travel agent. Sure. So you just talk to Brandy.
Dude, it sounds great in theory.
It was great because we didn't have to take the pain to go research. Hang on.
Wonderful. Hang on. Before you tell me the rest of the story,
you already know the story.
Let me pitch it for you. Let me pitch it. Let me be the Ivory Tower, okay?
Yeah.
All right. In the Ivory Tower, okay, Brian, the executive at Brian and Ohm's Totally Not Travel Company, I'm going to say, listen, we're going to get somebody who comes from a travel agency. It's going to be a sweet gig for them. They're going to be our internal travel agent. They'll handle the project managers. They'll handle executives. They'll handle sales, basically. I would start with one department. Let me just start with the project managers. Maybe there's only like 10, 12 of them. I don't know how many people there were in your circumstance. Where there's like near a dozen, or were there more than that?
You're not far off.
Okay,
about
so
15.
It can't be too many because then that person will get overwhelmed. But let's say like 50% of the people are on the road at a time. That's not that bad. That's 7 people constantly traveling. So as a travel agent, you want the travel to be as pleasant and efficient as possible for the person and the customer and the company. Where I think it would be a great benefit to the company is when you want to book a trip, that person comes and talks to you, figures out how you like to move around, figures out if you like to fly in the morning, the day before, day after, figures out if you want to take some vacation in between because they'll build that into the ticket. And they kind of talk about your agenda. They look up maps, figure out where you're going and stuff like that because maybe you don't want to fly in and then drive all the way across town. They're figuring out all those little details, coming up with a map, actually listen to what you're saying, and then can get you deals based on their expertise that you could not get yourself. So they might get a deal on the airline ticket where you don't have that kind of access. I work with contract people that could do this. Back in the day when you would do like laptop purchasing and stuff like that, like the corporate contracts acquisition person.
I remember it well.
She got great deals on laptops. And I was like, I don't know where you're getting the, and they were high-end machines, top of the line machines, but she got great deals on these if you went through her. But the business didn't make you go through her, but the people that knew was like, just go through the purchasing person. She knows the right people to talk to. Anyway, so this is that they know the right people to talk to. If you're operating in certain cities, maybe you can get a travel agent that already has contacts in those cities. Maybe you can hire the right person for where you do business, and it could be a really great, a quality of life benefit for the travelers in your company.
That is exactly how the marketing brochure was produced.
Okay.
The reality now.
Okay, hit me with the reality.
The reality was, this actually happened this way, right? So initially they said, what are some of your biggest frustrations, people? Sure. You travel people. Well, we call and we have to just stay on the line till we get a human to answer us, right? All that goes away because guess what? We hired a human now. Right. All right, so you call that person and wait because she's talking to somebody else. Mm-hmm. So the wait didn't really disappear at all. It was still there. She didn't come to you. You went to her and you said, I'm traveling. I need to travel these dates from this city to this city. She's like, I got you, right? I'll put you in a hotel nearby. Okay. It's up the phone. Next thing you know, electronic tickets are delivered into your mailbox. And then you realize, oh, you've got a two-hopper. You've got 14 hours in Minneapolis. That's how but it was cheap to do that specific booking, which is why she did it, because her mandate was to get the cheapest possible travel. But cheapest in what way?
Turn the 6-hour flight into a 23-hour flight.
So the company's still paying. They paid us for travel, right? So the company's still paying. So they put us in a hotel that's the other side of town. But coming back to this model of centralizing travel, in that case, it didn't last long because everybody protested, right? And they said, this isn't working. We're going to go direct anyway. You want me to travel? I'm going to book my own flight because I know I don't want to get out the house at 4 a.m.
Yeah.
I don't care if you're saving money.
I was going to say that where this stuff would break down is the minute that sales is inconvenience. So, like, I understand, like, the project managers, they probably could get away with a travel agent is, like, booking the cheapest stuff. And then when they say, okay, we got this internal travel person, now sales has got to use them, and then sales starts using them, then things will be like, wait, that's right. This won't work for me anymore. So that was the case for the Ivory Tower. I feel we kind of talked. I mean, we didn't really represent it very well because honestly, it's not really very metric based. Yeah. So the case against the Ivory Tower, the defense rests. Time to call to the stand the people. Alignment with business goals. Let's start with alignment with business goals because in the Ivory Tower, the people in the Ivory Tower are playing a game. Now, you opened up this podcast talking about incentives. Yeah. The Ivory Tower's incentives are divorced from reality a lot of times. The incentives in the Ivory Tower is to look good in the Ivory Tower to stay living in the Ivory Tower because Lord forbid you get cast out.
Yeah, because you're judged by your peers, right? That are also in the same Ivory Tower. Yes. You've never lived a day in those people's shoes that you're impacting, and that's a big problem.
I'll quantify that. I know what you're thinking. The Ivory Tower gets funded by all of the businesses that it supports, quote supports. And all of the business, let's say, for example, that you're a holding company. Like the Ivory Tower is a holding company, right? Mm-hmm. And the independent businesses are separate, right? So the independent businesses usually have general managers, somebody who's like a head of that business, right? And the heads of those businesses, they have a lot of power. I mean, you could call them middle managers. I think they
could be managing directors or something
like that. Yeah. But they're like a tiny step above middle managers. But usually the GMs, they have the ear of the CEO of the holding company above them, or whatever, PE or VC, whatever our situation is. And you can only get away with being a bumbling, incompetent Ivory Tower group until one of the GMs says, I'm not going to pay into your group. I'm not going to pay to use your travel consultant anymore. I'm going to part-time get my own, or I'm going to use this service and I'm going to pay for that. I'm going to pay for it out of my margins because I'm not paying into. So I'm not giving you, I'm going to figure out whatever I give you overhead, and I'm going to deduct that from the overhead, the cost of the travel people. Same thing. This is a slightly more risque, right? I'm not using your development teams. I'm going to go get my own offshore development shop, and I'm going to stop paying into your IT service project management PMO. Basically, I'm going to stop paying your PMO, all this money that we deliver to you to deliver software and services. I'm taking that and I'm taking that to an offshore company over here, and it's actually going to cost me less, and I get better service, and I've been vetting these contracts with my R&D money or whatever. So the minute one person rebels and puts their foot down, and the people running the departments in the Ivory Tower can't control them, because the GM really has the people closest to the work really have more control over the work. It's just they just need that like torches and pitchfork moment to be like, I'm not paying for this service. It's not good anymore. And then the CEO of the holding company, they're not like the King of France in this affair. They're more like America, like sitting out and be like, well, we'll find out who comes out on top. Like, it's a bad situation that can escalate quickly, and then someone in the Ivory Tower finds himself cast out. It's not pretty because nobody wins. The people are upset at the GM for rebelling. People are upset at the holding company for not acting sooner. People are upset at the employees because everything always rolls downhill. I have seen this happen at least once. Anyway, I don't want to harp on that. The point is the aligning with business goals. If the people in the Ivory Tower fail to align with my business goals and fail to deliver on my business goals, the person running the organization, the sub-organization, I guess, I got to tread water. I can't just drown because I'm waiting on you to make a decision or whatever. So I'm going to find my own way, and there will be contention. So rather than do any of that, I'd rather just avoid that and just keep all the people aligned with my business and my business goals or my product. Just keep them all swimming in the stream together and not play this game of, well, a little bit's here and we have to ask for people when we need whatever. I don't want to play that game. I don't want to play games is what I'm saying.
Well, you're in corporate America. You have to play games.
I don't think so. I don't think that's true at all. I think the more you divide the people that make the decisions away from the people doing the work, the more terrible your business is run.
Absolutely. It's so true. You just don't see it that way at the time, maybe. It depends on whose point of view you're looking at it from, right? You don't see it that way because if you're in the Ivory Tower, basically everybody else down there in the tower, everybody else down there are rebellious. So then what do you do? To
control.
And if you can't control, replace them, right?
That's problematic, again, because you're replacing them not with people that align with your business goals. You're replacing them with people that will do what you say, right?
Yeah.
That's a very Ivory Tower decision, but you can't really muck around in businesses when you're in the Ivory Tower because you'll quickly lose your hold. The amount of interference that you can do from the Ivory Tower is limited. Yeah, that's an interesting topic to talk about. It's not this podcast, but that's it. Management meddling. That's a Deming thing. We'll go into it on the Deming podcast.
We have one coming up.
Yeah, so stub out 3 hours out of your tape.
It'll be a marathon for sure.
Yeah, management meddling. Yeah, so a process that's in statistical control, and then management coming in and not understanding that the process is in statistical control because they haven't measured anything. They're just making assumptions.
Yeah.
So they're messing around with a process that's in statistical control, and they think that it's not in control. They think that special circumstances are affecting the process. So they meddle. They muck around in the process.
Right, which in turn makes it go out of control.
That's right.
The positive feedback loop.
I don't think we need to measure, run studies, do whatever to agree that if the decision-making process lives closest to the people doing the work, you get faster decision-making. And the people that are closest to the work can make more complex decisions faster.
And more effective decisions as well, right?
Accountability is a dirty word when you're in the Ivory Tower. Accountability is about blame in the Ivory Tower. Hey, I'm going to hold you accountable. Like accountability, when I'm a product manager running a product with teams that we all work together to build the best product, deliver the best service to the customer. Accountability is about me taking ownership of the customer's success. You know what I mean? It's a different relationship with accountability depending on where you're parked.
It's different than responsibility, right? Which is often thrust upon you. Nobody can make you accountable. They can say this is what your brief is,
right? But
you have to make yourself accountable for something. Whereas responsibility is this is your responsibility. Go do it.
Well, there's so if the accountability is in the business unit, in the line of service, basically in the value stream, I don't know. There's lots of terms.
Yeah.
If the accountability is with the team doing the work, discovering the work, producing the work, there's not an opportunity for blame shifting. If you have to go back up to the Ivory Tower to ask for workers and then they temporarily join the business unit and then come back, or maybe you have to wait on them. Maybe they weren't successful. They joined the company to deliver whatever and then they went back to the Ivory Tower, but then the thing wasn't successful. Now the Ivory Tower is going to be defending their people. There's a lot of blame. Yeah. Some games that are happening. And again, like none of this helps me as a product manager. I don't need to play a game with blame. I just need people dedicated to doing the work.
As from a product manager's perspective, it's just adding noise. That's all it is. You know, because the customer doesn't care whose fault it was within the organization. They just know they didn't get value and they wanted it.
Yeah. The other thing, we did an episode on Kanban, and one of the things in Kanban is analyzing your policies through your streams of work, or through your lanes on your board.
Yeah.
Columns. That's what they're called. Through your columns on your board, so that you can identify. You do that. You optimize your columns and you optimize your policies from column to column, and you do that so that you can reduce bottlenecks. So you can understand where your bottlenecks are, understand the flow to see where your flow is impeded.
Correct.
And then work on reducing those bottlenecks. I feel with the Ivory Tower in the cycle of all that I just described. We got to wait for a person, and the person joins. It might not be the right person, and they might not. Now they got to understand our business context. They don't know anything about our customers. All that kind of stuff. You're just introducing another bottleneck. Why? We don't need that.
In the lean kind of concept where Kanban originated, you're introducing delays.
Yeah.
And also, you don't have the right people looking at that board, and because they're not accountable. You've got this distance, right? So one of the things that the policies also do is they ensure quality. Something cannot be moved out of a column into another until that rigorous criteria is met.
Yeah. The other thing, we talked about this on a previous podcast, but I can't remember which podcast it was. It's been a long time since we said when people temporarily join your team and then hop off, right? Because they're going back to the holding company or going back to the ivory tower. Whatever learnings that you had to come to, whatever discoveries you had to come to, they're taking some of that with them away from your team. And when you add, like QA, for example, if we don't have a QA team, a tester is assigned to our team for a period of weeks or whatever, and they test the stuff for us, and then they go back to the pool of QA. And the next time we put out a big release, let's say we're like Airbnb, for example, they're constantly releasing updates to their software. They just hold them all because they want a big marketing pop. They want a big marketing push when they push out their versions. So they only push out their versions, I think, twice a year or something like that. It doesn't mean they're not testing.
Right.
It doesn't mean they're not releasing. They're releasing. It's just they don't send it to production to the app stores and all that kind of stuff. But let's pretend, for example, we're constantly testing, but we only release once every so often. Well, in that release, we're doing the big integration tests, and we're doing a full end-to-end type of test of our application. Yep. Maybe they do quarterly releases. Let's pretend it's quarterly releases. Yep. Let's pretend I was on a hike and then I decided that I want to do quarterly releases. Every quarter, we're requesting from the testing Ivory Tower business segment, hey, we need a tester to run through the quarterly release test plan, full integration, end-to-end, whatever. And then maybe we get the same person quarter to quarter, but maybe we get a different person. Is the quality of the tests the same? I mean, theoretically, if all the test cases are being exercised in the way they're being written, theoretically it shouldn't matter who the person is, but that's not really true.
No, it's not true, because other than just tests are binary, right? They either pass or fail. They don't kind of sort of pass. So that from that perspective, you could say, well, you could get any monkey to press a button. No, the point is, if you're doing this,
you just hit that is their viewpoint. That's the Ivory Tower's viewpoint.
Yes.
Yeah. The benefit of someone with a good test skill set, they can think like the customer. They understand how the customers use the software. They understand metrics. They've researched these things. They're not just running test scripts and then reporting on the app. They're giving suggestions about, like, hey, most customers in this segment, like the way you've lined the buttons up, someone that's in this specific segment have got to go through all this workflow, whereas normal customers don't. So maybe if we're thinking about this specific customer, this is not the best. They can think beyond the tests to help product make better decisions or not. I mean, they're just raising a conversation that needs to happen.
That's invaluable in my opinion. But the other thing is knowledge, like just simply process knowledge. Right? Whenever we run these tests every quarter, in this example, we find that the tests are fine when you run them on a staging thing. But then when you put this thing in production, it balks. Why is that? Right. And they figure out that, right? And then they're gone. Somebody else comes in and they have to rediscover all that and stumble over everything that was already discovered again from a testing perspective. Yeah. So it's just not a good model.
You ever work with like a development support team? They basically catch bugs in production and fix bugs. It's not a great process. Yeah, it's like a bug fix team, like a
KTLO team,
or like a hypercare. Like a big project management. They do hypercare period.
BAU team,
and usually
these different phrases.
The hypercare developers are like the B squad. Like they're not.
They're bored.
They're not the A
not
team.
Challenged.
Let's put it that way. They're not A players. Let's put it that way. Yeah. And you're hoping you get your favorite hypercare developer when you report a bug. You're hoping they take your bug, and you're like, oh, I got this guy. Oh man, that kind of stuff. Like there's no room for that. There's no room for that. If I had somebody embedded on my team who, when we didn't even talk about, sometimes the Ivory Tower hires the people they want to hire.
Oh sure.
And you don't even get
often.
You don't even get a choice. Of like, oh, what kind of testers are you hiring? So when we get a tester, they don't, they're completely insufficient for what we really need. There's a lot of big problems here that are not on my list. This podcast would be 2 hours if I went down all the rabbit holes that I wanted to go down. We don't have time for it. Conway's law, the structure of a system tends to mirror the structure of the organizations that create them. So if the Ivory Tower is this command and control apparatus, like I've seen in the past that companies that have Ivory Towers, they tend to have either a chaotic infrastructure that's always falling over, or they have a mega monolith. It's like,
neither of those are desirable, right? So yeah, absolutely. You're right. Absolutely. So Conway nailed it. His law goes back a while. And even today, it is absolutely true. Organizations form themselves eventually to reflect the mindset and the structure, right? And so the other side of it is then, what's the alternative, right, to that? You either have chaos or you have monolith that isn't nimble. What's the alternative?
Storing the Bastille. That's what the alternative is. Storing the Bastille, you don't need that. I mean, I would think that if you have an Ivory Tower, all of your sub-organizations and groups are going to start looking like the Ivory Tower.
That's exactly right.
And then that bad organizational design will start trickling down and having more influence until your smaller businesses or whatever, they start becoming ineffective.
It's like weeds. They grow.
Yeah.
Right? And so what's the alternative? A distributed model?
Just don't do any of this. I would keep in the...
Take a vitamin. Don't do any of this.
I would keep in the overhead. I would keep only the absolute necessary things that need to be in the overhead. Honestly, I'd put nothing in the Ivory Tower if it were up to me, but it's not up to me.
I was just going to say, look, so we talked about how ideal cases, teams, they don't have HR. They don't have any of these functions that they need on the team, right? So if you were to design a structure, an ideal structure, what would you keep outside the team is what I'm trying to say.
This is a difficult question because it's very contextual, but you almost need, let's pretend Brian & Ohm's holding company, right? Someone gave us a ton of money because they were a very bored billionaire. Any of you bored billionaires that are out there, feel free. I'm going to lay out a business plan for you right now. So Brian & Ohm get a couple $1 billion just sitting around. So what I would do is you would need, at the top of the business, you would need a visionary and an integrator. So straight out of the traction book, every startup has a visionary and an integrator. You have an operations person and you have an ideas person, right? You got your Steve Jobs and your Wozniak. Like that's what you have. Okay. If you're going to be acquiring companies and spinning them off to do their own thing, I assume there's a reason why you're bringing all these companies together under one house. The only reason that you would bring companies together is because they're very, very, very alike, I would think. So if they're alike and they're operating well, maybe you can look at the worst operating parts of the company and maybe take that.
Consolidation. Yeah. That makes sense if you're acquiring companies, let's say, in the same vertical, right? So you buy a competitor. So you don't need two off.
That's a standard case.
Yeah. I think there are specific functions that you might want to keep outside the team. For example, legal. There may not even be a need to have legal on every team.
Most companies don't. I'm like most startups, like tiny startups, they get their legal, they get their HR, meaning actual HR, not recruitment. HR. They usually use staffing firms for recruitment, staffing firms, headhunters, that kind of stuff for recruitment. So a lot of those functions really are outside of the business. I'm not against taking those things into the Ivory Tower. Any function I take into the Ivory Tower, I want metrics. Gives you the performance of those Ivory Tower derived services. This is the problem. Any service that you claim is going to be increasing the quality of life by taking this away from the companies and doing it as a service in the Ivory Tower, then you need to declare a service manager, like they can play the role, be part-time, right? Yeah, it's a very popular thing to have someone play the role, right? Yeah, yes. Service manager. But you need some kind of service manager to be looking at metrics of how happy people are with that service, what the times of delay are. But basically, I constantly want to know if we just broke up this central service and gave it back to the business units, would it be more costly to the business unit or cheaper? And would they be happier or not with it inside of their function? I constantly want to just watch those two things. So I guess what I'm saying is it's very contextual. I don't really have a good answer. My good answer is I would want to watch those two measures and constantly be adjusting and then make decisions quickly if I find out that the majority of businesses, the majority of subsidiaries, when we poll them, their teams that hire people hate using our corporate centralized recruiting because and here's all the reasons they put on the survey or whatever. It's slow, it's this, it's whatever. They don't know my business. So I constantly would want to be looking at that function is like a service management function. And I feel the function of service management is even less well understood than Agile coaching and Scrum Masters and stuff like that.
Well, we know this. We did a podcast on service management.
Absolutely. I'm starting to understand its importance. I really am. I'd like to have Brian back on.
Oh, I can get him back.
Because I'm really coming into understanding of you just need someone just saying, someone who can measure this is the quality of service of this line of service that we're delivering. And they need to raise a flag when the flag needs to be raised. And I think that's someone's full-time, potentially could be someone's full-time job, depending on how big we are, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, when we're smaller, and let's say Brian & Ohm's holding company only owns like 2 subsidiary businesses, well, then maybe we can do the job of service management.
Right. Yeah. And that's true. That's true. One of the other functions that I see
because
people...
What else are we doing? Buying yachts? What else are we doing?
Yeah, buying and selling yachts. It's a separate company. So one of the other functions I've seen being outsourced like this, just purely from a cost perspective, is accounting type functions like doing payroll, for example,
Sure.
right?
Yeah.
There are companies that do that for pennies on the dollar. If you were to get that in-house, it would cost you more.
Absolutely.
So then that makes sense,
Yeah.
right? The teams don't need that on the team, and that makes sense. So we're not saying we're eliminating the ivory tower. We're just simply saying it's more like a small efficiency apartment and not a huge multi-layered castle.
I don't know. Not me. I'm for eliminating it. Like, siege the Bastille. Burn it down.
There we go.
The people rest.
The people rests. I think, yeah.
I hope you enjoyed this podcast, Om. I enjoyed this podcast, throwing stones at the Ivory Tower. I don't know if we made a difference in the world here.
Well, the jury's still out.
That's right. The jury is in deliberations. We'll let you know when they make their... It might be a couple weeks.
Yeah, we'll get back to you. All right. Well, thank you again for staying with us this long. Let us know other topics that you're interested in.
That's right.
Like and subscribe.
And thank you for staying with us.